He was shooting crows, but the police were too busy tear gassing him to ask what he was doing up there. He screamed for an entire year every single time he opened his eyes. Oh man, at first it was funny, then it just got sad, but then it got funny again.
So, last year saw the launch of Back 4 Blood, the much-touted spiritual successor to the immensely popular Left 4 Dead franchise from back in 2008 and 2009. I picked up a copy not too long ago, and I was sadly disappointed to find out that, besides obviously having a lot better graphics, it played a lot worse than Left 4 Dead 2, which came out nearly 13 years ago. So much so that it basically made me want to just go back and reinstall Left 4 Dead 2, more specifically with a few mods that I'm going to cover in this video.
I don't think I like your attitude.
This would be really awkward if I gave a shit about your feelings.
To quickly rewind the clock for those unfamiliar, the Left 4 Dead games were a duo of first-person shooters largely focused on cooperative play, which saw you playing as a group of 4 survivors making your way across a series of multi-level campaigns during a zombie outbreak. It was an incredibly simple premise for a game, but what made it so engaging and so much fun was in how emergent the gameplay felt, thanks to its AI director. The channel AI in Games does a great video breaking down in detail exactly how the director works, so do go check out his channel. But essentially how the game works is that instead of having the infected and items manually placed throughout the levels, the director will spawn in the infected in real time as you play, based on how well you're playing. So if you're playing fairly competently, the director is going to increase both the frequency of attacks from the hordes and the special infected types to impede your progress. The special infected played a big part in this due to the way they were designed to challenge the players. The hunters were stealthy enemies that pounce players who stray too far away from the group. Smokers also employed stealth and used its long tongue to snatch players and drag them away. Boomers would instantly spawn a horde if their vomit projectile hits a player, or if they exploded in too close proximity. Then there were the boss infected, in the forms of the Witch, a crying female who will instantly launch into a lethal attack if disturbed.
There's a witch right here. Lights off!
And the Tank, which is, well, I think he speaks for himself. Left 4 Dead 2 would go on to add additional special infected in the forms of the Jockey, which rides players towards the infected, the Spinner, which attacks with acid, and the Charger. All of this worked together to create a gameplay experience that always felt incredibly tense and often unpredictable, but more importantly, all the more replayable. So I guess then naturally, like many other great PC shooters, people were quick to start making mods for Left 4 Dead in the form of character swaps and custom level packs, 3 of which that I want to talk about, which are based on the first 3 Resident Evil games.
I'll be examining this. Hope this is not Chris's blood.
Recently there has been a lot of fan-made recreations of the early era of Resident Evil, like the probably soon to be cease and desisted Code Veronica remake, and the Unreal Engine demo of Resident Evil 1, and the third-person remake of Resident Evil Survivor?
What's going on in this town?
But I never see anyone talk about this collection of mods, let alone even appear to be aware that Left 4 Dead is a thing, which I think is a shame because I think this is an incredibly fun way to revisit those old games through a different lens. I think it's also worth mentioning that Resident Evil actually did attempt its own take on the Left 4 Dead formula, with the 2012 game Operation Raccoon City. It's not as bad as some people try to make it out to be, but it does suffer unfortunately to some sloppy controls and really unbalanced gameplay. Like, who the fuck thought it was a good idea to have you fight large groups of lickers like this? Created by some guy called Roku, these campaign mods, which you can find in the Steam Workshop, aren't just simple survival maps. These are incredibly well realized recreations of the original 3 Resident Evil games, built from scratch in the Source engine, complete with all of the memorable locations and the puzzles too, all of which are broken up across several levels. So with Resident Evil 1, you start off inside the mansion, exploring as you would in the original game, trying to find the 4 emblems that lead to the next level, the outside courtyards and the guardhouse, where sadly there are no zombie sharks. Before you head back into the mansion and then eventually down into the hidden basement laboratory. I thought it was pretty cool how this campaign actually tried to mimic a sense of survival horror from the game by starting you off with just the pistol, and you have to find strong weapons as you explore in much the same way as the original game, compared to vanilla Left 4 Dead that just gives you decent guns from the start.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Resident Evil 2 has two separate campaigns that reflect the A and B scenarios from that game, splitting the perspectives between the survivor groups from each respective game. So in scenario A, you have to make your way through the back streets of Raccoon City before you get to the biggest level out of all of these campaigns, the Raccoon Police Department. Whereas in scenario B, you start off right outside the back of the police station before eventually heading into the sewers, marshalling yard, and Umbrella Labs.
Okay, I say we leave him in there.
Finally, Resident Evil 3 is the largest campaign out of all of them, set across Raccoon City, starting in the downtown streets before making a quick return to the RPD. You then head into Uptown, where you venture back and forth collecting items you need to fix the subway, which will take you to the Clock Tower, which was infamously cut from the Resident Evil 3 remake. Past the Clock Tower is then of course the hospital, Raccoon City Park, and lastly the disused factory for the finale.
Sent by Umbrella?
All of these mods also feature the original music from the games that plays in the corresponding areas, which really helps sell the atmosphere and makes you feel like you're back in those worlds, as any self-respecting Resident Evil fan will probably have those themes etched into their mind. There are also quite a few Easter eggs littered across the levels that both reference the games, like Wesker's favourite photograph, but also references to other things too.
Don't look at me like that, what did I say?
In place of all the boss battles that were in the original games, these substitute them for battles with the tank, which makes perfect sense, and are actually pretty intense due to how much smaller the arenas tend to be compared to vanilla Left 4 Dead, and on a few occasions you actually fight more than one tank. I will say it was a bit disappointing that across all three of these campaigns, there's only like 2 occasions where a witch will spawn. I don't know if the creator just forgot about the witch, or if they just couldn't find appropriate places for her to be spawned, given that these levels are more non-linear in design and require a lot of backtracking that's not really a thing in Left 4 Dead.
Don't shoot! I'm a human!
In fact, when it comes down to it, that really is the only negative aspect about these mods, is that the intended gameplay loop and design of Left 4 Dead kind of conflicts with the design of Resident Evil. Those original Resident Evil games were very claustrophobic in design, with lots of tight corridors and maze-like areas that were purposefully designed to keep the player on edge and make enemies harder to avoid. Whereas Left 4 Dead's design is a lot more open to accommodate having 4 players running around, and to have multiple areas the hordes can suddenly attack from. So what tends to end up happening in these mods is that the hordes will spawn, and you'll end up taking them out just by funneling them through a door. You'll also notice too that sometimes the infected will spawn in odd locations. It does however make the special infected a lot more lethal having more confined levels, as this means you won't be able to see them from afar anymore and you'll often get pounced going through doors. There's a couple of areas that probably should have been rescaled to accommodate 4 players and the faster gameplay, particularly the lab lift in Resident Evil 2, which Capcom actually did in the remake.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
And it probably should go without saying that you really need to be a Resident Evil fan to get the most enjoyment out of these levels, as it kind of expects you to know how to solve the many puzzles you're confronted with. This became pretty apparent when I was playing through the Resident Evil 1 campaign, which happens to be the game I've played the least, and I got hopelessly lost inside the guardhouse.
There must be some way to stop it.
But really, all of these things are minor gripes in the grand scheme of things, and I really have to hand it to the creator Roku for so faithfully recreating all of these locations and keeping all of the puzzles intact to make it feel like Resident Evil. Yes, even the boulders from Resident Evil 1 are here, and I accidentally got all of my team killed by one.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
And anyone who has played a good deal of Left 4 Dead will be able to attest that there is few things scarier than being the last player left alive in this game, like holy shit.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Combine these levels with some of the many character mods I've been using throughout this video, and I can see most Resident Evil fans having a blast playing through these mods. And yes, I'll leave links to most of them in the description for you. There is also a console command sheet that can allow you to play the game in third person too, if you want that modern Resident Evil kind of feel to it. Though I have to point out that the aiming in third person isn't as accurate as it is when playing in first person, but it's cool to have the option there. And you know the best part about all of this? Left 4 Dead 2 is hella cheap now to buy if you've never played it. Here in New Zealand it's only $12 and includes all of the DLC, and it's ported the campaign from Left 4 Dead 1 into it, which kind of makes the original game redundant now. And all of these mods, and even more, are easy to find in the Steam Workshop.
Claire, you made it.
As I mentioned earlier, Left 4 Dead still holds up incredibly well all these years later, and these mods I believe are a must-play for Resident Evil fans out there. So with that all said, I hope you've enjoyed this video for a new segment I'm calling Mod Corner. I really want to look at some more mods in the future, particularly Doom mods, both new and old. But until then, stay safe out there everyone, try not to disturb the witch when you play Left 4 Dead, and I'll see you all in the next video.